The training mat was unforgiving beneath Shi'vara's back. Again, the ceiling of the combat hall stretched above her, its vaulted architecture a masterpiece of Krallick's engineering, but she had seen it from this position too many times to appreciate it anymore. 30 seconds. That was all it had taken for Krell to break through her defensive stance and put her on the ground. 30 seconds to fail her 10th combat proficiency test. The referee's voice echoed through the hall. Match called. Insufficient defensive competence demonstrated. Shi'vara's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath. Her arms trembled, not from the brief exchange but from the weight of another failure pressing down on her spirit. Around the training floor, other students whispered. She didn't need to hear them to know what they were saying. The Lythan girl who couldn't fight. The navigator prodigy who couldn't pass basic combat certification. The brilliant academic who would never graduate because she couldn't survive 3 minutes on a mat. Krell extended a hand to help her up. He was Vorian, mid-tier in the combat rankings, selected specifically because he represented an achievable challenge. His golden eyes held genuine sympathy. That somehow made it worse. Shi'vara ignored his hand and rolled to her feet, her movements graceful despite her defeat. Lythans were elegant by nature, their slender frames and hollow bones designed for efficiency rather than durability. Her blue-tinted skin caught the light from the training hall's high windows as she bowed formally to her opponent, then to the instructors observing from their platform. Master Kelvar returned the bow, his weathered Krallick's features impassive. He had trained soldiers for 4 decades, and Shi'vara knew he had seen countless students struggle. But there was something in his posture, a slight downward tilt to his armored shoulders, that suggested even his patience was wearing thin. She walked off the mat with her head high, refusing to show the despair clawing at her insides. Her best friend Thalrix waited at the edge of the training area, his Vorian frame towering over her slight build. He fell into step beside her without a word, knowing that platitudes would only make things worse. The Galactic Military Academy on Craventi's Prime had been Shi'vara's dream since childhood. The fortress world housed the galaxy's most prestigious institution for military officers, tacticians, engineers, and navigators. Its halls had shaped leaders for 1,000 years, drawing the best minds from dozens of species. Shi'vara had scored in the top 5% on every academic examination. She could calculate hyperspace jump coordinates in her head while accounting for gravitational distortions that would stump most navigation computers. She had memorized star charts for 12 sectors and could recite the orbital mechanics of binary star systems from memory. None of it mattered if she couldn't pass combat certification. The requirement wasn't about becoming a warrior. The Academy's philosophy was clear. Every officer, regardless of specialty, needed to prove they could survive in a crisis. Space was dangerous. Ships could be boarded. Missions could go wrong. The combat proficiency test was simple. Survive 3 minutes against a qualified opponent while demonstrating defensive competence. Not win, just survive. Shi'vara had failed 10 times. That afternoon, she sat in Commandant Voresh's office, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. The Commandant was Krallick's like Master Kelvar, but where the combat instructor radiated martial discipline, Voresh embodied administrative precision. His office was organized to the point of obsession, every data pad aligned, every trophy from his distinguished career positioned exactly. He studied her file on his display, his dark eyes scanning information he had surely reviewed many times before. Finally, he spoke. Your academic performance remains exemplary. Your navigation practicals are among the finest I've seen in my tenure, but we have regulations for a reason, Cadet Shi'vara. She knew what was coming, the formal words, the regretful tone, the death of her dream delivered with professional courtesy. I'm authorizing one final test, 30 days from now. If you pass, you graduate with your class and receive your commission. If you fail, you will be transferred to the Civilian Navigation Institute on Trell 4. Shi'vara's breath caught. It wasn't expulsion. The Civilian Institute was prestigious in its own right, but civilian navigators charted trade routes and passenger lanes, safe corridors mapped 1,000 times before. Military navigators went to the edge of known space. They found new systems, plotted courses through uncharted hazards, rode the bow of exploration vessels pushing into the darkness. She had not come this far to be safe. I understand, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Voresh's expression softened slightly. I genuinely hope you succeed, cadet. You have the mind of an exceptional officer. Don't let your body's limitations define your future. But that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? Her body's limitations. Lythans were not built for combat. Their evolution had favored intellect and precision over strength and durability. While species like the Vorians or Kralix had retained their warrior physiology, Lythans had transcended physical conflict millennia ago. It made them exceptional artists, mathematicians, and navigators. It made them failures at the galactic standard combat form. That evening, Shi'vara found herself in the Academy's observation deck, staring out at the stars. Craventi's Prime's position on the galactic rim meant the view was breathtaking, a river of light stretching across the darkness. Those stars represented everything she wanted: mystery, discovery, the infinite questions waiting to be answered. She was so lost in contemplation that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps. You fight like you're apologizing for existing. Shi'vara turned to find a human standing a few meters away. She recognized him, though they had never spoken. Jackson Torres, one of the Academy's more controversial instructors. He taught unconventional warfare and survival, an elective that most students avoided. Humans had only joined the galactic community 60 years ago, and their methods were considered crude by the established military traditions. Torres was in his late 30s, his dark hair showing gray at the temples. His face was weathered in a way that suggested he had earned every line through experience rather than age. He wore the instructor's uniform with casual disregard for its precise regulations, his collar slightly loose, his posture more relaxed than any Kralix or Vorian would consider appropriate. "Excuse me." Shi'vara's voice carried more heat than she intended. "I saw your test today. You know the forms, you understand the theory, but every move you make, you're hoping it will be enough to satisfy the requirements. You're not fighting to survive. You're fighting to pass. There's a difference." Shi'vara turned back to the viewport. "I appreciate your observation, Instructor Torres, but I've had plenty of advice on how to improve my GSCF technique. None of it has helped. That's because the GSCF is the problem." She looked at him again, surprised by the bluntness. Torres moved closer, leaning against the viewport frame. "The galactic standard combat form is perfect for species that are built for it. You're not. A Lythan trying to fight GSCF is like trying to pilot a fighter craft with a cargo hauler's controls. The equipment doesn't match the operator. Then what would you suggest? That I suddenly grow denser bones and faster reflexes? No. I'd suggest you stop trying to fight like a Vorian or a Kralix and start fighting like someone who needs to survive." The human's directness was unsettling. Most instructors delivered criticism wrapped in encouragement and formal courtesy. Torres spoke like he was describing simple mechanical facts. "You're offering to help me." Shi'vara's skepticism was evident. "Your teaching methods are considered unorthodox at best." "Unorthodox." Torres smiled without humor. "That's a polite way of putting it. Most of your classmates call them crude, dishonorable, beneath proper military conduct. Then why would I abandon proven techniques for something the entire Academy considers inferior? Because proven techniques haven't gotten you past, have they?" Torres straightened, his casual demeanor shifting slightly. "Look, I'm not going to beg you to train with me. You've got 30 days and one chance left. Keep doing what you're doing, you'll fail. Train my way, maybe you pass, maybe you don't. But at least you'll try something different. What makes you think your methods would work for me? Because humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other with everything from sharpened rocks to nuclear weapons. We never forgot what it means to be outmatched. We never had the luxury of refining combat into an honorable art form. We just had to survive." Shi'vara studied him for a long moment. There was no arrogance in his statement, just flat certainty born from experience. She thought about her remaining options. 30 days to either achieve the impossible or accept the death of her dream. What would training with you involve? Hard work. Unlearning most of what they've taught you. And if the traditional instructors find out, they're going to be very unhappy. Why would they care? Because what I'm going to teach you violates about half of what they consider proper combat philosophy. Shi'vara felt something stir in her chest, not quite hope but perhaps its cautious cousin. And you believe I can pass the test using these methods. I believe you can't pass using their methods. Mine, we'll find out together. She made her decision quickly before doubt could undermine her resolve. When do we start? Torres smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Tomorrow. 0500. Auxiliary Gym 3. Bring comfortable clothes and leave your expectations at the door. The auxiliary gym was smaller than the main training halls, its equipment older but well-maintained. Torres was already there when Shi'vara arrived the next morning, working through a series of movements that didn't match any combat form she recognized. Fluid, practical, with none of the formal precision of GSCF. He finished his routine and turned to her. First question. When you end up on the ground during a fight, what are you thinking? That I've lost. Ground position is a fail state in GSCF. Wrong answer. Or rather, that's the answer they taught you and it's going to get you hurt. Torres gestured to the mat. Down, on your back. Shi'vara hesitated, then complied. From this position, she felt utterly vulnerable, exactly as GSCF taught her to feel. Torres dropped down beside her, not on top of her but close enough to demonstrate. Right now, you're thinking this is the worst place to be. I'm going to teach you to own this position. If you're going to end up here anyway, and you will, then you need to make it work for you instead of against you. For the next hour, he taught her basics that contradicted everything she had learned. Guard positions, how to control distance from her back, hip escapes that could create space even against a heavier opponent. Simple concepts built on leverage and positioning rather than strength. It was exhausting. By the end of the session, Shi'vara's muscles burned and her elegant combat uniform was soaked with sweat. But something had shifted. Being on the ground no longer felt like automatic defeat. It felt like a position with options. Over the following days, Torres continued to dismantle and rebuild her understanding of combat. He spoke during breaks, sharing context that the GSCF instructors never provided. Every species in this galaxy evolved past their predator stage and then refined combat into an art form. They had the luxury of making it beautiful, honorable, ceremonial. Humans. We were prey animals who became persistence hunters. We survived by being too stubborn to die. Then we spent our entire recorded history fighting wars against each other. Guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare. Fighting when we were outgunned, outnumbered, outmatched. He told her about human conflicts she had never heard of in academy history classes. Vietnamese fighters defeating technologically superior forces through adaptation and will. Afghan resistance outlasting empires through terrain knowledge and patience. Smaller military units surviving against larger ones through unconventional thinking. The galaxy forgot something important when everyone evolved past constant conflict. They forgot that survival isn't about honor. It's about going home. The training evolved through distinct phases. After groundwork came the principles of leverage. Torres introduced her to judo concepts, showing how to use an opponent's strength and momentum against them. Shi'vara's mathematical mind engaged with these lessons in a way that pure physical training never had. She began seeing throws and redirections as physics problems, vectors, force distribution, balance points. When Torres agreed to serve as her practice partner, she successfully threw him for the first time using proper technique. Her friend landed on his back, more surprised than hurt, and looked up at her with new respect. That shouldn't have worked, he said. Torres, observing from the side, grinned. It worked because she stopped trying to muscle through and started using geometry. Force times distance. Basic physics that the GSCF teaches but most fighters don't truly internalize because they rely on their natural advantages. Torres became a regular training partner, his initial skepticism gradually transforming into curiosity. He started asking Torres questions, trying to understand the human perspective on combat. You fight like the universe is trying to kill you, he observed one day. Torres didn't take offense, because it usually is. You know what the human life expectancy was 500 years ago? 60 years. You know why? because everything on Earth that wasn't human was trying to eat us, poison us, or give us diseases. We evolved in a hostile environment and never forgot it. You species reached the stars and found a relatively peaceful galaxy. Humans reached the stars expecting everything to be hostile until proven otherwise. By the second week, Torres introduced striking principles that made Shi'vara deeply uncomfortable. He taught her to target areas that GSCF considered dishonorable: eyes, throat, knees, joints, vulnerable points that could equalize strength disparities. Master Kelvar would call this dishonorable. She protested after a lesson on eye strikes. Master Kelvar has probably never been in a fight where his life actually depended on winning. Tor's voice was gentle but firm. Honor is something you can afford when you're evenly matched or have the advantage. When you're outmatched and survival is on the line, you use what works. Your opponents in the test won't be trying to kill you, but out in real space. If someone boards your ship, they're not going to fight honorably. They're going to try to overwhelm you with force. You need tools that work when everything is going wrong. The philosophical divide between human combat doctrine and galactic tradition became clearer to Shi'vara as training continued. The GSCF had been refined over millennia by species who viewed combat as a necessary skill, but not a constant reality. They had created something beautiful and efficient, built on assumptions of approximate parity and mutual adherence to form. Human martial arts had been forged in endless conflict, built for survival when nothing was fair and no one followed the rules. They were messy, practical, and uncompromising in their focus on the single goal: staying alive. Between training sessions, Shi'vara and Torres developed an unexpected rapport. He shared stories from the human-Zelthron border conflicts, where he had served as a special operations instructor. She told him about growing up on Lytha Prime, about the first time she calculated a hyperspace jump and felt the mathematics click into place like a key turning in a lock. "Why did you become an instructor?" she asked one day. "You could probably command your own unit." Torres was quiet for a moment, his expression distant. "Because I'm better at teaching people to survive than I am at leading them into situations where they need to. And someone has to show the galaxy that their fancy forms won't save them when things go sideways." He looked at her directly. "You remind me of myself when I was younger. Wrong build for what everyone said you should be, but too stubborn to quit. That stubbornness is worth more than physical advantages." News of Shi'vara's training with Torres spread through the academy with the inexorable momentum of gossip. Some students mocked her for her desperation. Others watched her practice sessions with curiosity. A few even asked Torres if they could join his classes. Master Kelvar summoned her to his office in the third week. The combat instructor's space was spare and functional, decorated only with weapons from various eras of Krallick's martial history. "I understand you're training with instructor Torres." His tone was careful, not quite accusatory but clearly concerned. "Yes, master. I have one test remaining, and traditional methods weren't working for me." The GSCF has served the galaxy for millennia, cadet. These human shortcuts may help you pass a test, but they won't make you a true warrior. Shi'vara felt a flicker of her old confidence, the kind that had carried her through academic challenges. "With respect, Master Kelvar, I don't want to be a warrior. I want to be a navigator who can survive long enough to do my job." Kelvar's expression flickered with something that might have been disappointment or perhaps grudging understanding. "Very well. But know that if you pass using these methods, it will be noted in your file." The warning was clear. Choosing the human path came with consequences. In the final week of training, Torres intensified everything. He introduced scenario work, multiple opponents, environmental hazards, weapons defense. He taught her to use everything around her: walls for leverage, obstacles for creating separation, furniture for barriers. Most importantly, he taught her something that horrified every fiber of her GSCF training: tactical retreat. There's no shame in backing up to find better position. Pride gets you killed. Positioning keeps you alive. Watch. He demonstrated how controlled retreat could draw opponents into overextension, how circular movement could prevent being cornered, how changing elevation even slightly could alter striking angles. The academy teaches that holding ground shows strength. Torres shook his head. Sometimes holding ground shows stupidity. Know when to move. The psychological shift was even more profound than the physical training. Shi'vara stopped viewing combat as something she was inherently bad at and started seeing it as problem-solving under pressure. Her academic mind, which had seemed like a liability in physical confrontations, became her greatest asset. She calculated angles and probabilities. She anticipated movements based on biomechanical limitations. She turned fighting into applied mathematics. Torres noticed the change. You're not fighting anymore. You're solving. That's exactly right. The night before her final test, Shi'vara couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters, running through everything Torres had taught her, feeling the phantom movements in her muscles. Doubt crept in during the quiet hours. What if Master Kelvar was right? What if abandoning traditional forms made her weaker rather than stronger? Her comm unit chimed softly. A message from Torres. Remember, you don't have to beat anyone. You have to survive 3 minutes while showing defensive competence. Use everything I taught you. And Shi'vara, they're going to hate how you fight. Don't care. A second message arrived from Thalrix. You're ready. I've sparred with you for 3 weeks. You're not the same fighter who failed 10 times. Trust yourself. When morning came, Shi'vara dressed in her combat uniform with steady hands. The fear remained, but it no longer controlled her. The testing arena was more crowded than usual. Word had spread about the failing Lythan training with the controversial human instructor. Students filled the observation areas, some hoping to see her succeed, others expecting entertainment from her failure. The judges sat in their elevated platform, Commandant Voresh, Master Kelvar, and 2 senior instructors from other departments. On the mat waited her opponent, Gardock, a Kroger warrior caste student. He stood 7 feet tall, his heavily muscled frame covered in natural armor plating that had evolved for his species' high-gravity homeworld. The contrast was almost comical. Shi'vara in her light combat uniform, slender and graceful. Gardock looking like he could walk through walls without noticing them. The referee called them to position. Shi'vara bowed formally, honoring the traditions even as she prepared to abandon them. Gardock returned the bow, his expression serious but not unkind. He knew her record. He knew this was her final chance. The timer began. Gardock advanced with textbook GSCF form, his movements measured and powerful. He expected Shi'vara to engage traditionally, to attempt the defensive posture she had failed with 10 times before. She didn't. Instead, she moved laterally, constantly circling, managing distance. Every time Gardock adjusted his angle to cut her off, she was already moving to a new position. This wasn't GSCF footwork. This was Torres' teaching. Never be where your opponent expects, never let them set the terms. The crowd murmured. This wasn't how Lythans fought. This wasn't how anyone fought in formal testing. Gardock adapted quickly. He was a good fighter, combat experience beyond his years. He began using lateral cuts to limit her movement, herding her toward the arena boundary. When he finally cornered her and launched a proper combination of strikes, Shi'vara did something that shocked everyone in the arena. She dropped into a guard position, voluntarily went to the ground. Gardock hesitated. This wasn't in any playbook he knew. In GSCF, going to ground was surrender, but Shi'vara wasn't surrendering. From her back, she controlled the distance, kept her legs between them, prevented him from establishing top position the way his training had taught him. When he tried to pass her guard, she used hip escapes Torres had drilled endlessly, creating space and scrambling back to her feet before Gardock could adjust. 45 seconds had passed. Master Kelvar's expression had darkened. He leaned toward Commandant Voresh, speaking quietly but urgently. The Commandant raised one hand slightly, signaling patience. Gardock was frustrated now. His training had prepared him for opponents who fought like him, who engaged in recognizable patterns. Shi'vara fought like water, never solid enough to pin down, always flowing to new positions. He increased his aggression, trying to force an engagement. That was what Torres had taught her to exploit. When Gardock overextended with a powerful straight punch, Shi'vara stepped offline, not blocking but redirecting. She didn't have the strength to throw him, but she had enough understanding of leverage to use his momentum against him. Gardock stumbled slightly, his balance disrupted, and had to reset. Shi'vara immediately went back to movement, circling, staying mobile. She snapped low kicks at his knees, nothing powerful but consistent, targeting his base. She used the arena walls to cut angles, preventing him from using his reach advantage effectively. 1 minute 30 seconds. She could hear her heart pounding, feel her breathing becoming labored. Gardock was barely winded. The physical disparity was immense, but she wasn't trying to match his endurance. She was trying to survive 3 minutes. Gardock caught her at the 2-minute 15-second mark. His massive hand clamped around her forearm, a grip she couldn't break with strength. In GSCF, this was a control position that would lead to a throw or submission. Shi'vara drove her free hand toward his eyes. She didn't make contact. Torres had been clear about that in training. The threat was often enough. But the movement forced Gardock to flinch, to protect his vulnerable areas, and his grip loosened just enough for her to twist free. Master Kelvar shot to his feet. "Stop. This is dishonor." Commandant Voresh's voice cut across the arena, calm but absolute. "The test parameters are survival and defensive competence. There are no rules against target selection. Continue." The crowd erupted in arguments. Half the students were cheering, caught up in the unexpected drama. The other half were shouting protests, claiming Shi'vara was violating the spirit of martial honor. Shi'vara heard none of it. She was in the moment, every lesson Torres had taught her flowing through her decisions. She saw Gardock's anger building, saw him shift from technical to emotional, exactly as Torres had warned would happen. Angry fighters make mistakes. She baited him, making him chase, burning his energy while she conserved hers through efficient movement. With 30 seconds remaining, Gardock tried one final assault, putting his full power behind a combination designed to overwhelm her defense. Shi'vara didn't try to block. She couldn't. Instead, she used judo principles Torres had drilled endlessly. She accepted the direction of Gardock's force and helped it go further than he intended. His momentum carried him past her off balance, and she was already moving away, creating distance. The timer sounded. 3 minutes. She had done it. Shi'vara stood in the center of the arena, her chest heaving, her uniform soaked with sweat. Gardock straightened slowly, his breathing heavy but controlled. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then the Kroger warrior crossed the mat and offered his hand. "That was unlike anything I've ever fought against. You survived. Well done." She accepted his hand, feeling the genuine respect in his grip. "Thank you for the honor of testing me." The arena was chaos. Students argued passionately, instructors conferred urgently, and somewhere in the noise, Shi'vara could hear Thalric's whooping with joy. Master Kelvar descended from the judge's platform, his face tight with controlled anger. "This is a mockery." She didn't demonstrate GSCF competence. She demonstrated human street fighting. Torres, who had been watching from the instructor's section, stepped forward. She demonstrated survival against a superior opponent using every tool available to her. Isn't that the point? The point is maintaining standards. Kelvar's voice was rigid. "If we allow this, we undermine millennia of martial tradition." Commandant Voresh raised his hand for silence. The arena gradually quieted. When he spoke, his voice carried easily across the space. "Cadet Shi'vara, your performance was highly irregular. It violated numerous principles of the Galactic Standard combat form. However, the test requirements are specific. Survive 3 minutes against a qualified opponent while demonstrating defensive competence. You did survive. Your defensive choices were unorthodox but effective." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I am ruling this test a passing grade, barely but sufficient." The arena exploded again, this time with more cheering than protest. Shi'vara felt her knees weaken with relief. She had done it. She had actually done it, but Voresh wasn't finished. "However, this test has revealed something important that this academy needs to address." He looked directly at Torres. "Instructor Torres, you said something that I've been considering. You said we've forgotten what real combat is because we don't need it anymore. I believe you may be correct." Kelvar stiffened beside him. "Commandant, surely you're not suggesting." "I'm not suggesting. I'm ordering. Effective immediately, Instructor Torres' unconventional warfare and survival course will become mandatory for all second-year students. Not to replace the GSCF. which remains our foundational combat system, but to supplement it. Vorish's gaze swept across the assembled students and instructors, because when our officers are in real crisis situations, in uncharted space or hostile environments, survival will matter more than form. We've become so refined that we've forgotten the basics: adaptability, practical thinking, and the will to keep fighting when everything has gone wrong. He turned back to Shi'vara. Congratulations, cadet. You graduate with your class. Your requested assignment is approved. Junior Stellar Navigator aboard the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge. Shi'vara couldn't speak. She managed a formal bow, her movements automatic while her mind tried to process that her dream hadn't just survived but had been fully realized. The following days were a blur of graduation preparations and celebrations. Other students, particularly those from less physically dominant species, approached her to ask about her training. Some traditionalists still gave her cold looks, but most had moved from disapproval to grudging respect. Thalrix was insufferable in his pride. I trained with her, he told anyone who would listen. I helped develop those techniques. Torres, characteristically, avoided the attention. When Shi'vara found him in his office to thank him properly, he waved off her gratitude. You did the work. I just showed you a different path. You showed me how to survive. That's everything. He smiled slightly. Just remember, out there in uncharted space there are no referees, no judges. Use whatever works, trust your judgment, and don't let anyone convince you that survival is dishonorable. 6 months later, Shi'vara sent a message from deep space. The Horizon's Edge had encountered raiders attempting to board during a refueling stop at a remote station. Using everything Torres had taught her, she had held a critical corridor until security arrived, protecting the navigation crew and ensuring they could complete an emergency jump to safety. She wrote, "You were right. Out here there are no rules, just survival. What you taught me seemed wrong to everyone at the academy, but it saved my life and the lives of my crewmates. Thank you for teaching me to fight the wrong way." It turned out to be exactly right. Torres read the message in his office, now busier than it had ever been with mandatory course enrollment. Master Kelvar had grudgingly begun incorporating some human principles into GSCF instruction, creating a hybrid approach that served students better than either system alone. The human instructor allowed himself a small smile and headed to class, where a new group of students waited to learn that sometimes the wrong way to fight is just a different way to survive.